Battle of Issus, November 5th, 333 BCE. Alexander III of Macedon, soon to be called the Great, is pursuing the beaten king of Persia across the rough Anatolian country.
For the first time in history, a Persian army has been beaten with the king at its head.
And at the climax of the battle, Alexander's cavalry had crashed into the Persian center and narrowly missed capturing Darius III outright. As they chase their beaten foe, they cross a small ravine by walking on the bodies of slain Persians and enemy Greek mercenaries, as though they are a bridge. But beside Alexander, among the bodyguard companions who he has selected in this pursuit, is a man named Ptolemy.
He's also a Macedonian, one of Alexander's closest friends and most loyal generals. A man who had been selected for one of the worst jobs in the battle.
To take the punishment on the left flank, while Alexander and his troops won the right and center.
So this is his victory as well. And though Darius will escape, they have won the western half of the mighty Persian Empire, including Egypt, the oldest kingdom in the classical world.
And before their store is over, both Alexander and Ptolemy will be its pharaoh and its god.
This episode is brought to you by my buddy Adam Chase from Jetlag's new docuseries, Scav, which follows competitors in the largest annual scavenger hunt in the world.
The Ptolemaic dynasty, Egypt's last, would rule over the kingdom for 3 centuries, bringing about massive cultural changes.
And the construction of some of the most famous monuments of classical Egypt,
such as the Library of Alexandria and the Pharos Lighthouse.
During their rule, the city of Alexandria became arguably the intellectual capital of the Hellenistic world,
stealing that crown away from the traditional center in Athens.
Fascinating. Given that the kings and queens of the Ptolemaic dynasty were in fact a Macedonian Greek minority, which managed to retain support from Egyptians over such a long period.
Check me out.
And as they did so, the Ptolemies adopted more Egyptian practices, while Egypt became more Greek.
A process you can trace through art, philosophy, and even burial practices.
But we are getting a few decades ahead of ourselves, extra historians. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm very excited for this series.
Where Alexander had shattered the field army of Darius III, opening up half of the Persian Empire to Alexander's control.
This was a massive victory, far beyond even the wildest dreams of Alexander.
Though it should be noted, this hadn't even really been Alexander's campaign. See, Macedonia was a relatively provincial Greek kingdom. One that was different enough from other Greek city-states that it was an open question whether they were actually Greek. For instance, when Alexander's father, Philip II of Macedon, had gone to the Olympics, he actually had to prove he was of Greek descent in order to compete in the horse race.
And there were reasons for that. See, Macedonia was a bit of a political and cultural oddball among its fellow Greek states, where others were democracies like Athens. or had a split monarchy with a council like Sparta. Macedon was an out-and-out monarchy, in a way other Greeks found uncomfortable.
In fact, in both major Persian invasions, Macedon had actually allied with Achaemenid Persia and let their troops cross their land, using this as an opportunity to seize nearby territory. Plus, they were savvy enough that they managed to keep most of that territory after the wars.
Meanwhile, their Greek neighbors were also very happy to invade Macedonia, which had some of the best farmland in Greece.
Athens had its philosophers. Sparta had its military culture. Macedon had the food. And that is a great thing to have if you want to build an army. So, that is what Philip II did. He reformed the Macedonian army around a core of heavy troops known as the...
At the same time, he'd trounced other Greek city-states in war.
Then used marriages and diplomacy to give Macedon a prominent position as the head of an organization he'd formed, called the League of Corinth.
With the goal of invading the Persian Empire. He also heavily developed his son and heir, Alexander III,
admiring Aristotle as his personal tutor, and giving him practical experience in both warfare and as regent.
The result was that when Philip was assassinated under highly strange circumstances, with some rumors suggesting Alexander was involved.
Alexander basically had an invade Persia starter kit.
He inherited Philip's spot in the League of Corinth, his campaign plans, his military, and his veteran generals.
For this reason, there's the argument to be made that Alexander's initial victories over Darius and the Achaemenid Empire were really more of his posthumous father's victories.
All Alexander had to do was execute and not screw up, which, to his credit, he did not. Sometimes Nepo babies be talented.
But here's the thing, Alexander was not his father. In negotiations, Darius basically offered Alexander the western half of the Persian Empire.
And had it been Philip in these talks, he probably would have accepted that.
After all, this was success far beyond what anyone had expected. A massive expansion of Macedonian territory.
A massive expansion of Macedonian territory.
Any other king would have declared victory and gone home.
Alexander said, no, because why would he settle for half of the Persian Empire when he could have all of it?
When he could have ALL of it?
Yeah, young Alexander was just kind of built different.
In a way that historians have never fully figured out.
Nothing was just ever enough for him.
He'd topple kingdoms and capture territory, then change his goal and insist on moving on to the next conquest. Of course, that didn't mean Alexander was rushing here to confront Darius.
He knew there would be years before the Persians could field a major army to confront him again, and he needed that time to consolidate what he'd won.
The biggest prize, of course, was Egypt. Alexander and his army, with naval support, marched south to the most ancient kingdom in the Mediterranean, not knowing what awaited him. It might have been combat or a rebellion, but instead, he was actually greeted at the border as a liberating savior.
Word had reached them of this young, dynamic king who had brought Darius to his knees.
Putting all the men to the sword and selling the women and children into slavery.
Yet despite this, they still did not fear him.